Welcome to another episode of United for a Healthy Stoughton. Today we are going to be talking about ballot question 4 and the facts about legalizing marijuana. And so today I have with me Karen MacDonald, who is the director of the Stoughton Youth Commission and also the chair of the OASIS Coalition. So welcome, Karen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right. So we thought today we would have a little bit of a discussion about question 4, why it's important to our coalition, and share some of the facts that we know about the ballot question, because it is 26 pages long. If people have received their voter guide, it's kind of a lot to get through. And so we wanted to pull out some things that have really resonated with us and with the folks that we work with, talk about some of the misperceptions that we've heard in talking with people in the community. We've been doing a lot of that lately, and share some of that information with you. So I thought maybe to get started, I would ask Karen why this particular issue is so important to the OASIS Coalition. Why do we care about this ballot question?
Well, for one, the OASIS Coalition is really focused on youth and youth prevention, and anything that causes greater access to any drugs, whether that be alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, opioids, anything like that. We want to make sure that we're limiting access, because the research tells us that the more that environment is saturated with that information, or that the product, that the more likely the kids are going to get their hands on it, just because they're creative and they know all the ways to kind of get around it. And our job is to prevent that access. So any access or any increase in access is potentially going to be an increase in kids using. Mm-hmm. So for us, that's really, when we talk about this law here, and many of the people who are for this law talk about it a lot in terms of alcohol. So they're going to regulate it like alcohol. Well, alcohol is still the #1 drug that kids use. Mm-hmm. And it is still illegal for them under the age of 21. And we're concerned about this for lots of different reasons, because the studies and all the new information that we're gathering on the brain really tells that brain development happens till 25, 27, and then anything that impedes that development is going to be dangerous for our kids. Mm-hmm. So this is it's really a difference, because for us, it's not the adults smoking a bone or in their basement or on their couch. It's really about the kids. It's really about what this law says and how it's worded. That this law was written for people who want this to pass. This was not the legislators did not put this law together. They got the signatures to get it on the ballot. So this law hasn't been vetted through the committee process, all of those different things as well. So I think that for us, it really has implications on the policy work on a state level that we're trying to impact. Mm-hmm.
Great. And I know for us, one of the other things we do is we look at that youth data, and so we know that since we decriminalized marijuana as a state back in 2008, and we've been watching our youth health survey data at the high school, our youth marijuana rates have actually gone up 15%, where we've seen our alcohol and tobacco and even our prescription drug use rates on the decline. Right. And actually, I think our alcohol rate has declined about 30% over that same time period, which is really significant. So it's concerning that something is going on in the environment that leads to increased marijuana use already, and that's prior to any passage of any law.
And I think that that's some of the when people get, I'm sure that they're getting in the mail the vote yes on 4, mm-hmm. That even talks about, like, we don't want people going to jail for marijuana use or mm-hmm. anything like that. The reality is that is just not happening. Mm-hmm. If you talk to the courts and the officials, that just for the chances of you go into prison for it, because it's decriminalized. Mm-hmm. That is the whole point of that. That means that you can get a citation for it, mm-hmm. But you cannot go to jail. So the fact that people are saying, please don't send people to jail anymore for marijuana, is just false advertising, mm-hmm. Because that reality just is not happening, because it's decriminalized in Massachusetts as it is. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, they have what the proponents call medical marijuana, which says that people are allowed to, with glaucoma, cancers, different things like that, have the ability to grow it, have the ability to get it delivered to them. I think that one of the things that people should really be doing is really taking a look at the pieces of the law, because we don't want anybody going to jail for, sitting,
of course.
Again, smoking a joint on their couch. But the implications for policies is a very different. Theoretically, I could be, the law itself and how it's written is really what we're opposed to, because for all of the different reasons. One of the big things is even talking. Can I just move right into some?
You can, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Is edibles.
Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest pieces of the edibles is that
And we have a picture of this actually that we could, while you're talking, that we can throw up what this looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you take a look at some of these things, my favorite candy bar in the whole entire world is Almond Joys. So if you look in the corner, you'll see Ghana Joy. That is also my kid's favorite candy
If you
bar
look
as
quickly,
well.
it really does look the same.
Right. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. Now, granted, when you look at these products, these are not geared for, like myself, the 40 age something. Like, I'm not going to eat a lollipop. But my kids love lollipops, even at 14 and 11. So what this tells people is that marijuana is not bad. And it gives the kids the perception that there's no harm in smoking marijuana or ingesting marijuana. Because I think that that's one of the things that when we think a behavior is less dangerous, kids are more apt to use it, or more apt to do it. If you, a good example of this is the seatbelt laws. When we were growing up, we never wore a seatbelt. Our parents didn't make us wear it.
We used to ride backwards in the trunk.
We used to ride backwards in the trunk, all of those things. But my kids would never get into a car now without putting their seatbelt on.
Right.
They think that it's a dangerous thing to not have your seatbelt on. So when people think things are less dangerous, there's an increase in people's use of that as well. So that's one of the, if this law passes, they will be able to advertise.
Right, which we have, let me change it. We do have an image here of what commercialization, what those ads look like in Colorado, for example, so we can put that up as well. I see Jeffrey running, okay.
So if you take a look at these, one of the things that has happened in Colorado is that they are specifically targeting college-age students as well as younger students. So again, there's Santa Claus. You can, in Colorado, they talk about if you buy certain things, you'll get a free joint. So I think that the advertising and, if you think about Massachusetts actually has some very strict laws in how alcohol or cigarettes or anything like that can be marketed. And if this law passes, some of those laws do not go into effect for marijuana.
Right, they don't exist in this particular question. So that would be something that would maybe hopefully have to be figured out. Right.
So billboards, all of those different things. So I think that we're looking at a very changing landscape if this law was to pass.
Yep. Absolutely. I want to go back to the edibles for a second, because I think the other thing that is concerning, and let's put the picture back up for a minute, about some of these edibles is, you're seeing all of these things right now inside of a package, except maybe the brownies. So, and so one could make an argument for sure, especially for kids who are able to read, that they would be able to distinguish between some of these products and sort of their regular candy counterpart or their soda counterpart. But in a lot of cases, if you were to find one of these things unwrapped or just in like a plastic bag, so let's take gummy bears as a good example. If they were just sort of loose or not in their original packaging, it would be really hard to distinguish a gummy bear that has marijuana in it from a regular gummy bear. And the other challenge with a lot of these products is that a serving size is sometimes one gummy bear or an eighth of a cookie. And I don't know about you, but I would never eat an eighth of a cookie. If somebody put a cookie in front of me, I'm not sharing it with you and 7 of my friends. I'm eating it.
Right.
So
and probably the next one.
And possibly the next cookie as well. And so what happens is these products have so much THC, which is the psychoactive component in marijuana, in them, that if you ate, the whole cookie, so you had 8 servings, or you ate 4 or 5 gummy bears, because again, I would personally never eat a single gummy bear, you've ingested a very large amount of this drug. And at those levels, it's a very different drug than when we think about smoking plant-based material, which is what most people think about when they think about marijuana. They think, they think about Woodstock, I guess if you're our age or older. They think about something that's sort of natural and organic, and these are products that are synthetic and that are manufactured and have very high potency marijuana. And so in Colorado and Washington State, what ends up happening is we see a fair amount of accidental poisonings, actually, with kids and with pets even, and in fact sometimes with adults, because if you're eating something, it does take longer for you to get an impact. So if you thought, well, I had 1 gummy bear, didn't do a lot for me, might have a few more, by the time the THC kind of gets into your system, you potentially,
minutes.
You've ingested a lot more than might be safe for you, and so that's how people end up in the hospital. So I think that's an important piece, and to go along with that is we also are seeing, I'm going to find the slide, some other engineered marijuana products. So maybe we can throw this up as well, because most folks I think are unfamiliar with some of these synthetic-based marijuana products. So if we could throw that slide up. Just to look at.
And that is, in the law, it allows for these to be sold.
In the law, right, exactly. So in the law, it allows for these types of things to be sold and manufactured. And so these are things, kids refer to them as shatter, wax, butter. They look like earwax, some of them. And they are very, very high potency marijuana products. Some folks refer to them as sort of the crack of marijuana. So this is a very, very different drug than leafy plant material marijuana. But as Karen had said, it is included in the law. And so I think it's really important for folks to understand that this also is what would be legalized if Massachusetts votes in favor of this law. So we aren't just talking about Woodstock weed. We are talking about all of these other high potency products as well, which can be really dangerous and can have very different impacts on folks who are using them.
Right. And I think that one of the things I think that people, as their research, which I'm sure that people are going to do before they vote, to research, because as an emotional basis for the law, people say yes. I want this to happen. I don't want people to go to jail for marijuana. It is less dangerous. They feel like it's less dangerous than alcohol. And in theories, like it's going to be, they feel like it's going to be regulated, and all of those things. But the way that the law is written, some of those things are not provided for. And it gives very specific dates for things to be enacted, and for the state to have to do. If those things don't happen, they can just go into production.
That's right. Right. Yep. There are some very fast dates included in this ballot question, and folks probably know, and because we're still dealing with this, is sort of the what happened when we legalized medical marijuana. So that happened in 2012, and I actually, whenever I think about that, it feels like it couldn't possibly have been that long ago, because we're still struggling to figure that out, and that's being managed by the Department of Public Health. In this case, this would be its completely own brand new commission, the Cannabis Control Commission and the Cannabis Control Board. And so that would have to be developed, and there is some prescription in the law about who sits on those boards. And to be clear, the Cannabis Control, it's I think the commission, the one that has, or the board, I'm going to get it wrong, the one that has sort of the most folks on it and provides insight to the very small upper level group, is the majority of the seats on that commission are folks who are in the industry. And so I think that's important for folks to be aware of, is that some of the rules and things that haven't totally been spelled out in this law and that might need some work still are going to be regulated and developed by folks who are in the industry. So if you compare that to, say, the the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission. That is not a commission that is run by liquor store owners and distributors of alcohol, right? So that's one of the ways that this actually is really different than alcohol when we compare that side by side.
I think too that when we think about the law as it stands right now, there is so many pieces of the law, and it's intentionally vague to. I don't want to say confuse voters, but I think for people to, again, vote with their emotions and not necessarily through the research around that. And I think that for us, as the OASIS Prevention Coalition, we feel like this is a very dangerous precedent for our kids. Again, this is not adults who can make their own decisions, whose brains are fully developed. These are kids, middle school kids, high school kids, and we vote on nostalgia. Well, I smoked some weed when I was in high school, or my friends smoked weed, and we still got into good colleges and all of those things. The THC content is so different.
We can look at that too, actually.
So if you take a look at that, 1997, 1983, and to what it is now in 2010, that's a very different. That's the difference between beer and vodka. And while at 18 or 21, a beer might not be a big deal for one kid, but that same amount of vodka or that same amount of is a very different, a very different things. And we know that parents care about their kids and their kids' health. But we want to make sure that people are voting on the law itself
right.
and not the theory of the law.
Right.
Because the theory of the law is a very different thing. Yes, we don't, we want to live in a free society. We want kids to be, we want adults to be able to make choices. But the law that it's written in Massachusetts is actually more lenient than many of the laws in Colorado and in Washington State.
That's correct. Yes.
And so I think that to be an informed consumer of the laws, because I think that we are not aware of what that would look like for our youth. That anybody age 18 and over could go into a store, could purchase marijuana.
21 and older. Yep.
Thank goodness. But that once that amount of weed is out there, then it becomes an access. Because in the same way, under 21-year-olds are not buying alcohol.
Not in this town.
Not in this town. We have very good laws. We have very good compliance checks. We have liquor store owners who are very serious about the work that they do, and they don't sell to minors. Kids are not going up to adults and tapping them on the shoulder and going, "Hey, will you buy alcohol for me?" That's not how they're getting their alcohol.
Right.
It's from their friends, older brothers and sisters. It's from parents' liquor cabinets. It's all those secondary ways that and alcohol continues to be the drug that most kids, when most kids are not using, but when they use, alcohol is still the drug that they use the most.
Right.
So I think that for us, especially as the Youth Commission Director, when we're helping to forge kids' attitudes, their impressions, their ability to critically think, I think that it's important for us to be the model.
Right. So I want to talk for a couple of minutes about what this could look like in terms of the landscape of Stoughton, because there are some pieces in this law also that really are about how a community can regulate or not some of the changes that could come with it. And so I think a couple things are really important here that are in this law that folks might not be aware of. So one is that any adult in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under this law can legally grow 6 plants in their household with a maximum of 12 plants. So if you had 2 adults or yourself and a child who was of age, you could grow 12 plants in a household. And that includes properties that are rental properties. So you don't have to be a homeowner to be able to do that. So if I was renting, not on your balcony. If it's it can't be in the view of the public. So I guess it depends where your balcony is. But if I was renting from you and as a landlord you said, listen, I don't want you growing that stuff, you wouldn't have the right to tell me not to. Or if your neighbor was growing it, or you were sending your kids over to play at somebody's house. I mean, if we think about as parents, I want to know if, when I send my kids somewhere, if it's going to be safe and the kinds of things they might be exposed to. This is another thing, as a parent, you might be concerned about is, again, those edibles inadvertently lying around, or, marijuana plants growing everywhere. And what that might mean, and the value of 12 marijuana plants is in the tens of thousands of dollars. So I think that's important. And then there is a piece about, I think a lot of times, and this came up a lot with the medical marijuana law, folks felt like we were interested in medical marijuana as long as we don't have a dispensary here in our town. So, it would be okay, but I don't really want it to be that close. So there are some pieces here around how the town could or could not manage this. So let's talk about that for a couple minutes.
Right. So if for Stoughton residents, as you know, we just did a referendum on building a new high school, and in order to do that, we had to do a special ballot. We had to print them. We had to get people out to vote to pass that new high school. That is what is needed for local regulations to. We can
throw up a slide about this, actually. There we go.
Thank you. Sales activity by a majority vote of its residents, which means a referendum. So you think about what it was like just for us in Stoughton to have a special ballot just for the high school, or different things like that, and to have a special ballot, and the cost to the town. Every time there is an election, the poll workers, the counting, all of those things are, runs thousands and thousands of dollars every single time we want to make a change. And then, absent a majority vote, any city or town with
a treatment facility, a marijuana treatment facility.
Right. For Stoughton, we're lucky and we don't have that. So we don't have those things, but
our neighbors do.
But our neighbors do. And there's going to be more of them. Because dispensaries are already trying to get into the towns beside us. And if that happens, and this vote happens, they will automatically be allowed to sell recreational marijuana.
Right. So the medical marijuana treatment centers, so I guess on the slide they were calling them MMTCs in shorthand, basically have the first right of refusal in terms of selling recreational marijuana. So towns who have had agreements with these folks where in the past they've said, you know what, we are okay with a medical marijuana treatment center coming to our community. We don't love the idea of selling marijuana recreationally. Let's put together an agreement. All of those agreements become null and void under this law, so they wouldn't be enforceable. And in fact, the law really is written such that that is the first place that we would see recreational marijuana happening, functionally side by side in some of these treatment facilities. And it does say now or in the future. So that means that communities that have yet to open a treatment facility, if it's in the works, those folks are also eligible under this law to really be the first to become offering recreational marijuana. And I think the piece to this we had talked earlier about is that there is a date in the law, I think within a year essentially, that if the state does not set up the Cannabis Control Commission and the Cannabis Control Board and some of these additional regulations aren't in place, that automatically at that point all of those places can start selling recreational marijuana with absolutely no additional regulations. So, we'd be talking really about a huge industry that's functionally unregulated, and it's hard to undo stuff, once you move forward. And I think that's the other piece with this, is that the legislature really has to live with what exists in this ballot question. So, as Karen was saying, they're really, I think, for folks to think about, sometimes there's good intention and not great law, and that I think there were folks that felt that way when we talked about medical marijuana, that they felt like in theory, of course, folks who needed marijuana for compassionate care for reasons that, that their doctors felt like it was appropriate, that was a good thing, but that the law itself had a lot of challenges in it, and we're watching that play out even now. So you can have good intention, not great law, which means that sometimes, one thing folks can think about is, I believe in this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that this is the right time or the right way to do it. And that's what people, I think, really need to figure out when they look at this and look at the 26 pages and have to think about what they would like to do in this case.
And as the amount of recreational marijuana shops or pot shops is directly related to liquor licenses. So if you have a liquor license, if you have 20 liquor licenses, you can sell, you can have 4 pot shops
automatically.
And to reduce that number, you would have to go back to the referendum. So I think that there's a lot of things in this law that are very troubling, and I think that people should really do their research before they get out and vote. And so that would probably be my biggest, to read the law, to understand what this is actually going to mean, and to research it and not to vote based on nostalgia or based on an emotional feeling about this, and really to look at the law. We do have some really great resources on the OASIS website.
Yep, and a lot on Facebook. So it's easy for us to update our Facebook page really regularly. And in fact, if you go to our OASIS page, you can, and you look under marijuana, you can link out to that. So it's another great way to get a lot more information. There's so much more we could have talked about in this half hour. We're already almost out of time. But just to let folks know, a couple things that are coming up. If you are watching this before November 1st, basically on November 1st, which is Tuesday of this week, we will be at the Stoughton Y, and we're going to be holding Hidden in Plain Sight, which is an interactive exhibit. It's for parents. It's really about the kinds of things that your child might have in their bedroom that you might not even realize could be signs of early drug use. And so we'll be there from 5:30 to 8, and we'll be talking to folks. So we're happy to answer questions about this and also about that exhibit. We're there again Wednesday morning from 9 to noon. We're doing that in collaboration with Easton Wings of Hope and also the Stoughton Y. And then on our social media and on our website, we have a bunch of videos. So the last episode of United for Healthy Stoughton, I interviewed Chief McNamara and Chief Carmichael from Walpole. We talked a lot about this and lots of other news stories and ways for folks to get information. So we're out of time, but thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.